everybody. Hi, thank you all for coming. So nice to see all of you here today and to see the exhibition, to listen to us talk, and on this closing day. So today, right now, we have a wonderful talk by Ed Morris, who's a freelance intellectual, philosopher, botanist, among many things, perfume maker. Because he lives such a free life that he doesn't go with society's expectations, and he's a man who's always gone on his own flow on things, and really just a very wise and grounded person through the years that I've known him. And even in my path in living a more free life, he really helped me unlock a lot of the kinks in my life in terms of my family and having a fatherly role model for myself, because my own parents, they couldn't give me what I needed in terms of like be more confident and living a life that's more pleasure toned rather than survival, based on survival. Ed's the person who really helped me pull through. And he's an author of several books, from Metropolitan, from the National Endowment for the Humanities, and also from the Metropolitan Museum. He wrote a book on the Garden of China. He wrote a book called The Sense of Time, and another one on perfumery.
Right. And one on philosophy.
Yeah, one on philosophy that the newest one is not yet in print form. His other ones are, but this new one, I think he wants to do something new virtually. It's called How to Be Bad. So how to truly be bad, not the commercialized way of to be bad, but a real way. So he will explain that. Right?
Thank you very much. Can everyone? Thank you. Can everyone hear?
Yeah.
I wanted this circle form, so feel free to bring out questions or some of your own experience with work. Now, work is a very, very loaded question. There is a work ethic, the famous Protestant work ethic, and a whole book was written about it by Max Weber, the father of sociology, around 1920. So feelings run very deep about work. There's no sleep ethic. There's no basketball ethic. There's no eating ethic, but there sure is a work ethic. So feelings run very high and very strong on work. So let's go a little bit back into history. The Greeks were the first great philosophers of the West. And to the Greek mind, they wanted to absorb the pure. So this is the vision that Plato had, that's in the Republic, of mounting up through different stages to view the light of being, of pure, unadulterated being. And so the ideal of the Greeks was to view this wonderful view of, it's called theoria, means looking, the vision of the divine or of being or the truth. So who did the dirty laundry? Who did the dishes for the Greeks? They had slaves. So the upper class was a leisure class, and the highest thing was philosophy, but they were very, very creative in all their works. The Romans inherited the Greek tradition, and they inherited slavery even more. The slaves in the Roman Empire were a huge percentage of the workforce. Some of the army were slaves. So they also had the idea of otium. Otium is in Greek, in Latin, means leisure. so that the great philosophers would walk around and think and so forth, and they wouldn't have to work with their hands. The slaves would do it. And then Christianity appeared in the Mediterranean world, and there was a new development by Benedict of Nursia. Benedict of Nursia took the idea of monastery, and maybe it came from India. There's a very great possibility that it did. But instead of saying that the monks will just pray and think and have leisure and read books and copy manuscripts, he said that they should work as well. And his famous saying in Latin is laborare est orare. To labor is itself a prayer. So this was very different from the monks in the Eastern Empire who followed the teachings of Saint Basil. They would have not slaves, but they would have workers to clean the pots and, mop the floors and so forth. But they would have the experience of the divine. So this was the history of work. Now, what happened with that was that the monks took over in the West and in the East, and they were little islands of culture. And even though in the West they did a lot of work, in fact, the monasteries, they wanted to be away from the hubbub of society, so they would go to the forest, they would go to the deserts, and they would work in such a way that they made them very fertile lands. But they kept up their study of theoria, the pure vision of truth. So then there were also soldiers, knights, and this was a mark of the feudal period after the barbarian invasions in Europe. So the knights fought. And then there was a slow development where people began from the monasteries to teach other people who weren't going to become monks or nuns. And this was the beginning of what we call the university. And they studied everything. Universitas in Latin means all, like a universal. So they would study everything. So the biggest university was in Paris, and then the next biggest one was in Oxford, and then there was one in Bologna and Salerno. And they were always linked to the monks because the monks had the books, the library, and they were literate. And so a lot of the knights used to boast that they didn't know how to read and write. That was for sissies. But the monks certainly knew how to read and write, so they would begin teaching people who did not plan to become monks. So you have a beginning of a new class called the clerks, or the scholars, or the intellectuals. And by the time 1500 came around, there was a big change in Europe. And it's called the rebirth. Renaissance is a rebirth. And they began to say, no, you don't have to be a monk at all, that all this intellectual achievement of the classical world belongs to everybody. And they also began rejecting the Puritanism that was in Christianity. Christianity said, vision of God, yes, but don't have the vision of dinner tonight. That was worldly, that was fleshly, and you could wear rough clothes to keep you awake because they were scratchy, but don't wear fine, beautiful clothes because that would make you soft and degenerate like the ancient Romans were, they thought. But there was Marsilio Ficino was a great scholar in Italy, and he said, no, it's all wonderful, it's all God, it's all beautiful. So you can wear clothes that are beautiful. You can eat food that is delicious. You can have sex. You can go for a walk in the mountains. You can look at the human body. This is all wonderful. So this was the beginning of the Renaissance. And it really was a beautiful thing. And it began in a garden of all places. At the garden in Fiesole outside of Florence, where the Medici family had a summer place. All the intellectuals who were not monks, some were monks, but mostly not, they would gather together and study and write and read poetry and paint and have fun. So this was the beginning of the Renaissance. It was like a beautiful thing happening in a garden. And there was also another factor. A lot of people could not become monks, knights, and go fight the sword. And they became the scholars. And you know why? Because they were nearsighted. You can't go fighting like this if you can't see the opponent. So that had something to do with the burgeoning intellectual class in Italy. The nearsighted ones could read a book, but they couldn't fight a duel very well. Where is he? So there was a technical reason for the development of the new intellectuals. And work was almost an honor. Just like St. Benedict had said, work is a prayer. They were saying creativity is also work. And so they began studying the tradition of the Greco-Roman world, and they loved everything. So they began painting, writing, and so forth. And these were all pleasurable things. So Luther appeared on the scene in 1510. He went to Italy, and he hated it. He said, "Oh, they're all having fun. And this is not what the meaning of Christianity is. Christ suffered on the cross. He had nails. He had a crown of thorns. This is not, and he didn't go around naked like a Greek god. How can you say you're Christian?" So he said, go back to the Bible and you'll find out that, the Spirit giveth life and the flesh killeth. The flesh kills. So don't be interested in flesh. So that was the first beginning of what we call today the Protestant work ethic. And he said, how do you keep from having fun? It's by hard work. Now, did hard work mean painting, the Last Supper? Did it mean painting Mona Lisa? No, that was not what he meant by painting. He didn't even like them. He wouldn't even allow art in the churches. And they destroyed a lot of paintings, a lot of stained glass, because he felt that was wrong. And then Luther was followed by someone even more severe, and it was John Calvin. And John Calvin said, we have the kingdom of the saints. And it was in Geneva, in Switzerland. And he linked work to money. And that was very, very powerful. In the old days, if you were hungry, you could go to the monks and they'd say, yeah, here's the thing, do some work, here's a free meal. But they closed the monasteries, so no more free lunch for them. And he felt that if you give somebody something, they'll get lazy. And laziness was the worst sin to the Protestant ethic. It was the worst sin because you're relaxed. So it was very great for building an ego. I want this, I get it. How do I get it? I have hard work, and I get what I want. There's nothing of, oh, let's go into the woods and see what we see. Let's paint it. Let's write a poem about it. Let's put on beautiful clothes and have a party. No, that was Italy and France, the Renaissance, but not the Protestant culture. And so it was linked to capitalism. So capitalism means you could collect money and save it, and you had Zeben, capital, that you could work with. If you didn't do that work, you wouldn't have capital. And If you were a painter, you wouldn't make money because it was too much fun. So work became associated with pain. Now, remember, the Greeks, in a way, had associated it with pain by having slaves do the work. But in the Renaissance, they began to throw that off. No, all human activity is wonderful. And it's a humanism, and it's all religious. They felt it was a religious experience. But the Protestants said, no, religion is in pain and hard work. And when you get to heaven, then you can relax and rest your weary bones. So, but this is not heaven, this is earth. So this is a big dynamic force in Western culture. And they had very many fights between the Protestants and the Catholics. And eventually the Protestant ethic really took over. It took over Germany, it took over Sweden, Scandinavia, Switzerland, and above all, England. And England went all over the world trying to make money. And they would make money by hard work, even if it meant selling opium to the Chinese or the Indians or whoever they met, because it was basically work. And it wasn't fun. Now, when the French had gone to China, the French priests, Père Attiret, they loved China because the Chinese culture was humanistic. And they were humanists. So they both knew how to have fun because they were both used to it. And painting, which is fun, one of the greatest painters of China of the 18th century was an Italian, a Catholic priest called Giuseppe Castiglione. He began painting for the Emperor Qianlong, Kangxi and Qianlong, and he even painted all the harem of Qianlong. And then the emperor said, we want to have a garden. And instead of saying, oh, no garden, that's too much fun, the French priest said, yes, of course, we have gardens too. So they began creating the Yuan, Ming Yuan together. The Chinese scholars and the French and Italian Catholic priests. And they put together a huge garden, which is like the Versailles of China, but it had a section called the Western area. And they had something that the Western technologists had developed very much, fountains. Chinese gardens do not have fountains. It's a still garden. They may have a waterfall or something, but they don't have forced water. But Louis XIV had lots of forced water. So the emperor said, oh, he has one. Well, we want one too. So they made some beautiful gardens. But in the traditional Chinese culture, there was a love of this, Siyan. Siyan is a picture of looking at the moon through two doors, like a gate. So to sit, have a tea, drink wine, and look at the moon, and sing a song, and write a poem, and play with the kids, or smell the flowers, the jasmines in the moonlight, this was Siyan. This was the ideal of the Confucian humanists. And there was another expression that is very beautiful called fosheng, a floating life. And there's a famous book called Fosheng Liu Ji that was written in China around a little after Qianlong. And it means the floating life. So it's written with the three dots of water because you're floating. So people realized that work, yes, China certainly worked. There was, the workers were very highly respected, the peasants. But you can only work so much, and then you knew how to enjoy the life. So there was a linking between the humanism of the West and the humanism of China. And this was very nice for like a few, maybe 100 years, that the two cultures both agreed. But then in 1799, Lord Macartney came to China and he said, no, we want business. We don't want art. We don't want to paint the harem girls. We don't want to make fountains. We want to make money. So he said to the emperor, don't you need, what we have to produce? And he said, no, we are luxuriantly proficient in everything. This is a quote from actually Mencius. We have everything we want. We'll trade with you, because they felt they needed ginseng and rhubarb, which are medicinal herbs, but we don't want trade, because we don't want to keep people busy. It's not the goal. So Confucius once watched the water flowing down from a waterfall, and he called it Liu Xing. It just goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. And he meant that the world process just goes on. So sometimes the water goes this way, sometimes you work hard, sometimes you play hard. It doesn't matter. But there is a natural evolution in the personality and in the day and in the year, where sometimes you push and sometimes you relax. So I think this is very important. We have to redefine work in a better way. That if work is coextensive with pain, it does not serve the human personality, and it does not serve society. Because a society of people in pain is gonna cause trouble. And the biggest example was Germany in 1914 and 1939. This is a culture with the work ethic. And Hitler had over all the work camps, Arbeit macht alles. Labor does everything. So this was Luther's Protestant ethic carried to the nth degree. So work, 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 work. So there was very little Renaissance in Germany, very little in Switzerland, none in Scandinavia, because they were working. They were working too hard. But the human work of processing and making form and beauty and so forth, they did not get into. But they were rich. So the Mediterranean countries to this day have the play ethic or the fun ethic, and the Brexit ones have the work ethic. And so they're always saying, oh, these lazy Greeks, don't they know how to make money? And yes, they do, but they also know the famous word in Greek is kefi. Kefi is a word that comes from Arabic. The Arabic word is kef, and kef means chill. Kef is, oh, they're playing the oud. They're serving me coffee and baklava. I'm looking at the boats in the Bosporus go by. I'm smelling the breezes. I'm beautiful clothes. I'm enjoying myself. My family's all around. This is chill. This is kef. Now the Greeks took it from the Arabs, who gave it to the Turks, and the Turks gave it to the Greeks. So one good thing the Turks gave to the Greeks. And the Greeks still have that moment of enjoying pleasure. And you know the Italians still have ozio, is the Italian form of otium. And the French have le loisir. And the French know how to flâner. Now, do you know what flâner means? No, because it's a word in English. Flâner means to go down the street and check everything out. And when you get hungry, stop in a pastry shop and talk to your friends. for hours. So I was staying in France when I was doing some research on the history of fragrances and natural products. And my friend who lived there, he'd moved from New York to, I said, where's Tony, his son? Oh, he and all his friends are out to flâner. They're out to walk the boulevards and see what's going to happen. Now, do they walk hard and meaning? No. They're, oh, look at that. Oh, whoa, that's interesting. I never saw that building before. Oh, there's a new pastry shop. Let's go. A movie's opening. So this is the play ethic or the enjoyment ethic. And in Italy, they even carry it further. They have the saying, dolce far niente. Does anybody know what that means? Dolce is it's sweet. Far is to do. Niente is nothing. So it's sweet to do nothing. Now, what I want to do is rehabilitate this idea of leisure. Actually, I believe that leisure is work. Because in leisure, all the domains of being are open to you. Just like if you're strolling down the street, not to make an appointment or to do a job, but just to enjoy the life, to see the sky above, the earth below, everything. This is a human work. This is a work of living in the cosmos. You're living in the world. You are having a relationship with the world. When you just say, well, what am I going to get out of it? That purposefulness strips down the richness of being. So I feel that the Nazis and, of course, the communists, they make work into another creed that's just as fanatical as the Lutheran, as Luther and Calvin did, and it's work, the working class. And so, you know, I know some Marxists, and I said, well, I'm not a member of the working class. I have fun. I'm an intellectual. I think. Oh, no, you're really a member of the working class. But it's not work to think. It's fun. I can't help thinking. I get thoughts in the middle of my night. Well, you're really a member of the working class. But if you look at the history of Marxist society, they usually wind up killing all the people who think. So they have honor to work. But really, work itself is defined. When I was in New York, young, in the 17th, the job was a file clerk. The file clerks would file, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't exist, this job. Tellers would be in every bank, not teller machines. So what should we say? The workers of the world unite, all the teller machines, go, all the computers march. No, because they are doing the work that used to be done by human beings. And it's, thank God, that humans don't have to be file clerk. It's very hard and degenerate work. So what we have to do, I feel, so that we don't have another Nazi outbreak or communist fanaticism, we have to really see that the work that our epoch is to create form. That is the beauty of work. Work makes form out of chaos, and order out of disorder, and unity out of disunity and multifacetedness. So in a way, all work is alchemy. Alchemy is you take the black mud or lead and you begin to stir it. And if you keep stirring it and heating it properly, it begins to turn from black to green. And if you keep stirring it, it turns from green to red, just like the green plant produces a red fruit. And then if you keep stirring it, it creates the dan, the elixir, which is silver and gold. So the alchemists were really doing the work of mankind. They gave a model of a true worker. So the alchemists used to say, work slowly, and our work is easy. So they say alchemy's work is women's work, in other words, not heavy carrying or masonry, and child's play. So the alchemists in world history were the ones who explored play. And there's a whole book by Huizinga, a Dutch philosopher, called Man at Play. Homo in Latin, homo is mankind. Ludens is playing. And he, especially in Erasmus, who did not become a Lutheran, saw that there was a play element. So really, the work ethic is too hard on us individuals, and it's too hard. The net result of the conglomeration of individuals is a society of people in pain is not good. It's not stable. So you want to have people in pleasure. Now, because of Puritanism, which is from Calvin and Luther, there's a terrible thing if you say, oh, dolce far niente, I chilled out all day, I went to 3 cafes, and I talked a lot of ideas. Oh, well, you call that work? But actually, it is work, because you're processing information. You are shaping reality, your reality and the reality of the world. So we have to put the ethic away from the work ethic and say that, yes, it's ethical, but only if you redefine work. Work should be creativity. Now, creativity, you cannot just say, oh, I'm going off to be creative. It doesn't work that way. Yo yin, yo yang. Sometimes you're hot, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're emotional. Oh, I'm so excited, I just can't hide it. Sometimes you're emotional, sometimes you're blue. But those are both parts of your human personality. There's the bright and the dark side. You have to have them both. Now, my last job was in 1976 when I worked for the state. I worked in a prison teaching the prisoners and so forth. And I just said, no, I have to be up in the morning. I work blah, blah, blah. And there's no freedom and creativity. So I wound up teaching the kids from the prison on off hours. When I would finish the 9-to-5 job, I'd come home, eat dinner, and then I'd go back and I'd teach them martial arts, exercise, meditation, health, different things that they were really interested. They weren't too interested in the regions, but they're very interested in martial arts. But what did they need? They needed discipline. They didn't need an academic degree at that point. The discipline took precedence. No discipline, you're not going to have a degree. So I began, when I was laid off, thank God, thank the OPEC oil crisis, because it was a state institution, we were all laid off, and everybody was crying, oh, I have no work, I have no job, what are you going to do? Oh, jubilation, I'm free, I don't have a job, I don't have a job. And my father-in-law would come for Sunday dinner, and he would pass me the war dads from the New York Times. And I was very polite, thank you. But one day, I had enough, and I said, I don't want them. I don't want to look at the want ads, because my existence is my job. So now, of course, Calvin rigged it so there's no free lunch. You do the kind of work they define, and you'll get money. You'll have lunch. You don't do the work they define, and you'll starve to death. Giuseppe Castiglione could paint beautiful women all day. And he would have lunch and have dinner and everything. Nobody complained, of course. Oh, it's so beautiful. Pialian, pialian. So they love that. But here, if you're an artist, you might as well, make your will out. It's a very, very hard thing. So in France, to this day, if you're an artist, in other words, you've had a showing, you have blah, 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 you get 40% off your rent, because they still have the Renaissance ethic of art is a genuine labor. Even though it's pleasurable, don't be misguided. The greatest work is pleasure. Now, we have some wonderful examples in American history. So the greatest, of course, was Emerson. Emerson was offered a job at Harvard University. Whoa, very swanky. But he disagreed on their point, and they kicked him out. And he said, "No, I'm happy, I'm out." And he began writing an essay called The American Scholar. And he said the American scholar can put together things from all over the world, Europe, the Native Americans, and so forth. And he never had an academic job ever since. And he lived long. And his great friend Thoreau, I've been in Emerson's study, in his room. It's very beautiful. And I saw Thoreau's cabin. It looks so cold and poor. So whenever it got too cold, Emerson would say to Thoreau, "We'll spend the night, spend the night." But he never told Thoreau, "Get a job," because he had a job. It was walking through the woods and processing and writing his experience. And then there was a third one in Concord called Bronson Alcott. And he is famous among philosophy people, but Louisa May Alcott was his daughter, and she also didn't have a job, but she wrote, and she wrote Little Women, Little Men, etc. So, and then another great person came who was a loafer and not a worker, and that was Edison. Have you heard of Edison? I think so. And his mother said, "Oh, you're too smart to go to school. I'll educate you at home, and you'll educate yourself. So you're too smart to go to school. They'll cut you down." So he didn't go to school. And did something come out of that? Yeah, I would say. And another one was Buckminster Fuller. The Fuller domes that are everywhere. He went to Harvard, and then he said, "I want to think." Now, he had a job for the War Department because he made things in World War I for the submarines and so forth. But he said, "No, I have to think about mankind and how we humans are going to live." And he actually was on welfare in Chicago thinking. And can you imagine his guilt? Because he's from a Protestant culture. So the guilt was 3,000 pounds per square inch. And even his daughter died because it wasn't heated or enough. But his wife stayed faithful to his dream, and he stayed faithful. And then he began all this creativity. It just poured out of him. And he always said, "Follow your intuition. Follow your intuition." That is the voice of God, and that will guide you into what needs to be done in the world. Now, who else said that? Steve Jobs. He said, "Listen to your inner voice, or the voices of others will make you deaf." Now, did he do anything? I think so. I think so. So we have a great tradition in America of the freelance intellectuals. In France, it's even greater. So there are professors in the Sorbonne and different colleges that are very doctrinaire and narrow-minded. But most of the philosophers were like Camus. He just rode around on his motorcycle, and Gabriel Marcel and Marcel Blondel, and these were these were called intellectual and engagés. They were engaged intellectuals. They lived in the streets. They didn't live in a university. Some would go from time to time to a university, but generally the university professors were boring and dull and not active in the society. And even the priests in France became the worker priests. In other words, they didn't just go to church, they would go and help the workers. So I met one, and I brought his book because it also reminds me of what's behind Alvin, the can. This is Abbé Pierre, and this is the rag pickers. After the war, after he had been very engaged in fighting the Nazis and so forth, he saw that there were so many homeless in France, in Paris. And what could he do? He had nothing. So he began organizing the chiffonniers. Chiffonnier means chiffon is rags. And what do they use the rags for? Paper. They make paper. High quality paper is rag paper. So he said, we'll organize you and you'll go around and collect all the rags and put them together, and then we'll sell them by the bale to the paper makers. And where could they live? You know where they lived? Under the bridges. Because they were homeless. So he organized this, and he formed a Catholic commune and so forth. And eventually they had little barracks like out in the street and so forth. And I met him because I was working in a Catholic commune in East Harlem called Emmaus House. And he was sort of the angel inspiration for us. And I was elected to be his translator because no one else there could speak French, and my French isn't that good. So we would walk around East Harlem and he'd say, oh, look at this, cuivre, this is copper, you can get money from that. And this will help your things, because our work there was rehabilitating prisoners that were on parole, and et cetera, et cetera. And it made sense. But later, when he went back to France, I found out somebody already put that idea together. And who is it? The mafia. The mafia pick up all the garbage like that, all the metals. So you may have a broken kneecap if you cut in on their business. Something he did not have to worry about in Paris. So I began thinking, it's very hard to live marginally, but also philosophically, it's very distressing, because in a way, the canners enable the waste of this culture. They are enablers of the waste. Now, I'm not criticizing them, certainly, and today they have a voice because they're doing all they can, and they're heroic. They're very heroic, and I talk to them all the time on Delancey Street. They're heroic, but to me, that we should have money not by pain work, we should have money by creative work. And it's a need of the society. And Alvin was telling me about Andrew Yang, and he's always saying that people are going to be laid off because the workers are no longer going to be working. The technology will find substitutions just like they have for the file clerks, just like they have for the bank tellers. They're going to find a substitution. Now, what should we do? Have a work that we hate? So, some people are writers, but they say, 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. No, writing is fun. So I've written books with deadlines, and I've written a book without a deadline, and it's much better to write without a deadline. And does it mean the book will never get done? No, you have to have faith in your entelechy, in your life word pulse. Yes, you'll have the hot and the cold moments, but basically, we want to be creative. We want to make form. We want to bring light out of darkness. We want to bring unity out of diversity. This is a human impulse, just like it's the impulse of the Big Bang, which is all chaos and commotion, has gotten finer and finer, and it's evolved to the point where we have consciousness that you can't even see, but life is conscious. We can sing a poem or a song and people are very moved, but can you see a song? No. But so we have evolved. So we have a desire to work, but in the true sense of being creative. And I do recommend to you, look at the traditional Chinese culture. It's very rich in type of people who, when they were hot, they were hot. They wrote a play, they talked, they organized society. But when they were not, they were not. They just said, oh, you know, I just have to trank out and be quiet or meditate or something like that. Because it's yo yin, yo yang, there's both. So, can you say the Chinese Confucian elite was not creative? Oh, no, it is immense achievement in world history, probably the highest literacy rate up to the industrial era, and the highest amount of infrastructure, roads, canals, and so forth. And it had a non-aristocratic bureaucracy, management team. It was a great achievement. So you can't say it didn't work. So, and you can't say dolce far niente turns up drug addicts or loafers. No, is an Italian Renaissance great? Yes, it's great. And in a way, it still exists in Italy. Italy is still very creative. And in France and Italy, you say, I'm an artist. They don't say, oh, well, how do you make the rent? They never say that. They say, oh, cause stupendo. They like it very much. Oh, it's a great compliment. And they realize, they don't say, oh, do you sleep late? Do you get up hard and start your artistry? No, no, no. And once how are we doing on time?
Actually,
yeah. So once they did an article in 世界日报 about my lifestyle, which they like very much, and an artist came to visit me, and I said, "Oh, Miss Chu, are you a creative artist?" She said, "Oh, you're the only one that asked me." I said, "What did they ask you?" Are you a productive artist? Whoa. Productive artist is not an artist. It's not an artist. You can't be an art machine. You have to have the flow and the closeness to the human spirit, which has its bright and dark. So I want to invite you all to rethink what is your authentic work today. For you, because each one of us is important. The revolution begins with each one of us. In a way, the communists are right. There's a cell to the whole tissue of the human society. And if you are a healthy cell and having fun and being creative, it makes the rest of the tissue healthy. So I hope this has been inspiring to you, that we have to get to work. But the fun work of creativity, but it's not an option. It's the only way we're going to go forward.
Any questions?
Yeah, any
comments?
questions, anyone?
Or anyone talk about their own work experience, what things are going on now for them?
I have a question.
Yes, sure.
So what I'm understanding is that there's necessarily, like, you need a little bit of love and creativity and leisure as part of our work. But what if I'm thinking of Confucius, who himself went from like kingdom to kingdom to like beg for someone to like, hire him basically. And what if, the things that you're passionate about, the world around you doesn't see that in you? So how could you afford to have that leisure when you, go out to find work, right? Because it's always like we're answering wanted ads, like we're finding work, someone to take us and make us productive, but
No. See, the first premise was wrong. Yes, it's okay to have fun and we need creativity. No, that is the main course. That's not the side dish. That's the main necessity. Then the question is, how do I eat? How do I live? Because the Protestants have made it's not a religion anymore, it's an ethic. They've made sure that you're not going to have fun by what you like and have free rent. In France, it's different. In Italy, it's different. In Spain, it's different. But we don't live there. And also those cultures are under great pressure by the Protestant ethic. They're very big pressure. Germany would like to have them all dance to the music of the lockstep. No, it's a very important question. I think the first thing begins with the inner switch. You have to switch yourself, throw the switch. I have the right to have fun, to work the authentic work that my heart guides, because your heart is the voice of God. It's not God's in you floating around the space. God is in your human heart. So yes, I have the right to have fun, to do what my heart says. You have to say, I have the right. Okay. Now, when you have the right, it means you have the right to do it ethically, but also food-wise, rent-wise. In other words, it's not a right if you're going to starve or be evicted. Okay, so the right is holographic. The right means yes. So unless you yourself say, yes, I have the right not to be, a lockstep hard worker, but a soft worker, but a true worker, if you say to yourself, yes, I have the right, then your inner resources, what the psychiatrists call the subconscious, the unconscious, will kick in, and ideas will come to you. Also, you will radiate to other people. They'll say, oh, he wants to be an artist, but I can see he means business. It's not just a frill. It's not just a Sunday artist in the park. He's very serious. So they will take your seriousness serious. See, so it begins with you. Now, obviously, you can't leave your day job like this, but some people have. Some people just finally said, I've had it. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm going. And the next day they were well fed and doing what they like. So you have to listen to your heart. If your heart says clean break, just jump into the future, jump. But if it more normal, say, what am I going to do? Wait and begin devising your escape route. How am I going to get out? Who likes what I like? How do I hang with the people that are doing what I do? How do I meet people that say, yes, you're really wonderful, you're immense, you're terrific, you're very creative, keep it up, pat on the back, we love what you're doing. Don't hang out with the people that say, that and a token will get you on the subway. Don't hang out with them people, because you have to hang out with the people that will give you chi. But the first thing is yourself. If deep down you don't believe you have the right to be happy, see, the American Constitution doesn't say the right to happiness, it says the right to pursuit of happiness. But we have to go further and say, you have the right to happiness. You have the right to happiness. So when you yourself know it, then the world reverberates, and then ideas will come from you and from the world, because it's a hologram. So that's the first thing that I would say is throw the switch. And then don't be rough on yourself, because we're for fun. So don't go leaping into nothingness or go into homelessness. But ideas will come, and you will find out that crime pays. Crime of not having the work ethic pays money. So you'll find out that crime pays. Okay. I have 4 kids, there are many mouths to feed, but everybody's well fed, and. But my kids grew up without guilt because, it's a free life. That's what they were used to. Any other reaction?
Yeah, I remember when I first met Alvin, and Alvin was talking to me about you, and then I think the first time I met you, one of the things I said was, it's such a struggle. Like I really want to paint, I really want to do more creative work that, that focuses on what I care about. Right, and the work I do is good. It's not. I'm a workers' rights lawyer. Like I'm getting paid for something I am doing that doesn't make me feel like I'm going to a job. But still, it was not enough for me. And I think the first thing you said to me was, just plan it out. Don't jump into something just because you feel so strongly about it. Plan it out, and that kind of just took the pressure off. That like there is something at the end that I can. Aim for, but just take my time, and it's okay. And I thought that was so just something so simple, that really took the pressure off.
Yeah, play. In other words, play with it. Play with your career. Oh, I could do this. I could see myself doing that. I'm going to go to a movie about this or that. Play with it. Because play is not only the goal, it's a means. It works. Believe me, it works. Okay, any other reaction or experience of your own work? Yes.
I love your history. I love how you brought it all the way and brought it alive to us, and from history to now. And the important thing, I think, in what you're saying is that we all have the desire to be something maybe that's not hard work related, but we need that planning of the hard work in order to make the fantasy or the imagination or the desire to do what you want to do. You have to have a little bit of both. Like you said, you just can't jump into it. You have to have some kind of a plan to have money to eat and also fulfill that desire that you want. And it's all about fulfillment in my life right now too. I recently just started wanting to go into acting. I'm also a flight attendant for a major airline that I've done many years. So I have the flexibility in my schedule to do what I want to do, get paid, and also drop trips if I want to in order to pursue the acting that I want to do. I've also done financial advising, but I did that also concurrently with my career in flying, and also helping my daughter also to achieve the things that she had to do. And Chinese parents, Asian parents, and many parents have the desire for their children to be professional. But the thing is that the desire versus the profession could be the same thing, but most of the time it's not the same thing. The desire of your parents and the desire of other people who view what jobs are worthy. So you have to say it in your mind. You have to turn on that switch you're talking about to produce that creativity that is so in all of us.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's in all of us. It really is. But the throwing everything away and jumping right into it is, of course, we all know that's not going to be the easy. There's never bread on the table. You do need that, and you have to be a little bit realistic about where you're heading to do these things. So it's the acting and the business of acting. You can pursue acting skills, which don't really feed you yet, but you really know how to pursue and get the job too. So it's really common sense and trying to plan and put that all together. And that means for any other career that you all pursue, all the things that you wanted to do, that technology is really taking over many of the jobs, and you have to kind of foresee what is happening in your lifetimes. And you don't want to regret at the end. That's my mantra. If you want to pursue it, fulfill, and don't be afraid. Do not be afraid of what you want to pursue. Just do it, but plan it.
See, I agree very much that you have allowed your passion play, And also, you have not dropped yourself into the abyss either, so you're comfortable now. But sometimes people do just jump. And you say they just leave everything and jump. But they don't leave everything. Why they jump is that they're keeping their passion. Sometimes you've just had it up to here. And I've read stories of creative people who just said, "Ganuk, enough. I'm going. I don't know how I'm going to live, but I'm going to live." And they do. Because the unconscious within them and the unconscious within others gets it, that it's a time for them to move. And sometimes it's like the princess and the pea. You may have that day job, but it bothers you. It's only a little part of your week, but it bothers you. It's like the princess and the pea. That little pea is. So sometimes it's not so orderly. But what I'm saying, rather than plan, I would say fantasize. Allow your mind to fantasize. Don't say, "Oh, I have to think about this, how am I going to survive?" No, don't live in the future. Live in the, say, "Oh, if I won the lottery, what would I be doing every day? What would things like that." And believe me, the society has the money for it. One nuclear submarine could put us all in a guaranteed annual income. But no, because of the Protestant ethic, they put the surplus money away so we won't have fun. But there is surplus money. So, but I'm very happy that you have opened to what you love and admitted it, and then you're comfortable with yourself that you're having money come in ways you can see right now. But sometimes, life is pushing you, and all you can have is your passion, and yet you wind up landing on good, soft soil. You really do. Yes?
Can you share what was your communication with your parents when you...
Oh, they hated it. They hated it. They hated it. My brothers and sister won't even speak to me. I'm like the traitor to the ethic. They hated it. They just hated it. My grandfather, who was older and from a different culture, he loved it. He thought it was very nice. And he said, "I'm a lawyer, but I don't want to work for a firm. And I could have been a rich man, but I want to be self-employed." And he taught himself Spanish so he could read Don Quixote in the original. And he fooled around. He understood, and thank God for me, I had him. But no, they hated it, and society hated it. But it helped to study Chinese culture, and it helped to study European culture, French and Italian. So I speak French and Italian, and it's a help but the Chinese traditional culture really has this omnifaceted human verse. Su Dongbo did catchment basins for flood control, but he's also a poet and a philosopher. That is the personality that's so attractive of traditional culture.
All right, thank you so much.